Thank you, Acting Deputy President. Now, the government's sudden decision to include YouTube in its social media ban for under 16s is a textbook case of panic-driven policy, not principle. It's a backflip so hard and fast it should come with a neck brace. And make no mistake, this just won't cost them the youth vote. It'll cost them votes across the board, in my opinion. Now, YouTube is a platform for learning, creativity, and free expression. Everything that the government should be supporting. By slapping a ban on YouTube for under 16s, which is what this is, this government is sending a clear message to young Australians: we don't trust you, we'll decide what you're allowed to watch. Now, everyone wants to protect kids online, but let's be honest, this isn't solely about protection, it's also about control. This ban, it triggers mandatory ID verification for all ages, and it opens the door to full-blown surveillance of every single Australian. Now, bureaucrats have no business micromanaging our digital lives, and parents should have the right to raise their own children and not have the government make these decisions for them. Now, this government's digital nanny state is growing by the day, but this ban is not going to make kids any safer. It is just going to make them more angry. And when they're old enough to vote, they are going to remember which party treated them like chumps for daring to try and watch YouTube of all things. This government has lost the plot, in my opinion, and they're about to lose an entire generation. But you know what's funny? What's funny? This government wants you to provide ID so that you can use YouTube, but they're not going to ask you for ID in order to vote. That's just a bit silly, right? Thank you.
Craig, Kelly, meet Andrew Bridgen. I've been wanting you two to meet for a long time, and I suspect you'll find you have a lot in common beyond even rugby. But Craig, tell me what your view is of the famous and infamous Andrew Bridgen, who's been so brave.
I've admired Andrew from across down here in Australia. Our career paths followed very similar patterns. We were both members of the ruling Conservative parties. We both saw through this COVID hoax, especially the vaccine harms that were being caused. We both spoke out against it. We both resigned from our parliamentary parties, and we both got hammered in the media, absolutely trashed in the media, and had our reputations torn to shreds, even though we were speaking the facts. And we both suffered pretty harsh electoral defeats when we ran as independent candidates.
Were you aware of all of that, Andrew? How much you had in common?
Well, it is pretty much the playbook around the world. Those who go against the narrative, I mean, there is only one way to deal with them. First of all, you cancel them, ridicule them, smear them, financially damage them, and get them out of office. I unfortunately discovered some years ago that you can say any lie you want to in the House of Commons and the partisan crowd will cheer you, but if you start telling the unpalatable truth, I mean, I spent 20 months eating all my meals on my own in the Palace of Westminster, but that was only for telling the truth.
I'm sorry, I laugh at that because I had exactly the same experience sort of thing. You know, you're a person I'm great. I remember here in our Australian Parliament, it used to be the Wednesday night was the big night when all the functions were on, because Thursday was the last day and everyone went home on the Thursday afternoon. So Wednesday night was sort of, you call it the party night or something, but so every Wednesday night there used to be like, a dozen invitations of events and things at embassies that you could go to, and different companies put things on. And the minute I spoke out, all those invitations dried up, and I spent sort of most of the night sort of thing, going out to get a pizza and sitting in my car while a pizza was cooking from that.
Yeah, like Billy No Mates. Yeah, it's interesting, but there was a lot in the UK Parliament. There's about 4,000 real people, the cooks and the cleaners, the waiters, yes, the security guards, and they all knew. They were all, when there was no one about, they would always come up to me and say, "You're absolutely right, Andrew. We're all praying for you. Keep going."
Yeah, it's exactly the same. I had all the security guards in Parliament House, because often you'd come in and out sort of thing. There'd be no one else around apart from one of the security guards. "Oh, good on you, Craig." They go, keep fighting. We're all behind you, sort of thing. In fact, even at like a a couple of colleagues that would they would only speak to me if there was no one else around. They'd approach you in the corridor and they'd sort of like look around that there was no one else about, and they'd say, "I agree with you 100%." And I would say, "For God's sake, man, why won't you speak up and say something?" They go, "Oh, no, I can't." You know, just absolutely.
Well, I even had people I thought were my friend, and in November 2022, when I was canvassing them to help me stop the government from jabbing down to babies of 6 months with the COVID-19 vaccines, which I did, but nobody stood with me. I mean, some of them even admitted they were terribly vaccine harmed themselves. One of them had 2 heart attacks after the second Pfizer jab and still wouldn't speak out. Another one had got the sister paralyzed from the neck down with Guillain-Barré syndrome, and she wouldn't speak out. Another one, his sister had to go to hospital. I had MPs' wives coming to me telling me I told him not to have the booster. Now he's got a heart condition. But nobody spoke out because, I mean, what was done to us and others, probably in Australia, but me in the UK, I mean, half of it was punishment for daring to go against the. I mean, I was told by the party grandees, you know, there is no political appetite for your views on the vaccines. There may be in 20 years' time, and you're probably going to be proven right then.
That's right.
But in the meantime, you need to bear in mind you're taking on the most powerful vested interest in the world with all the personal risk for you, Andrew, that will entail.
Yeah,
well, they weren't shy about it. You know, that is the warning, and that I had that warning in January 2023.
Wow. Yeah, I was in 2021. I actually resigned from the government here. It was in February 2021 because I could see the writing on the wall, and there was enormous pressure. What we saw here in Australia, I think you had a more maybe in the UK. I see there was more intense brainwashing, but here
we are number one. The UK is still number one for soft power in the world, and that is actually propaganda. I mean, that's not beat around the bush. That's what. Yeah, and our media is, you know, because we've got no time zones, we've only got one media for the whole country, and they've absolutely got it buttoned down for all the media channels through the regulator, Ofcom. They're anybody steps out of line, they just take the licenses off them and fine them. So they've got an absolutely iron grip over the media in the UK.
Well, I was a regular appearer on Sky News here in Australia. In fact, my parliamentary colleagues used to joke that I had an office up in Sky News's room sort of thing. That's how often I was on. And in the early days of the COVID, I did a couple of interviews on Sky News, and I just simply stated the facts, quoted directly from peer-reviewed studies and comments of highly credentialed experts. Facebook and YouTube went back and actually censored 7 of the videos. There were 7 videos they censored off Sky News. I was in 6 of them. And they told Sky News, if you repeat one more of them, and they suspended them from posting to YouTube for 7 days. And that's where most of Sky News get their revenue from here in Australia. And they said, if you do it again, we'll give you a suspension for a month. So Sky News basically said, look, I'm sorry, Craig, we can't have you on anymore. So the only media outlet, outside of that I could speak on was on Sky News. All the other media channels were demonising me and not giving me the chance to have any pushback. And Sky News was the only outlet, and I was black banned from Sky News. My Facebook account, my Facebook account, actually the ABC did a segment on it, and they showed my Facebook account was getting more traffic than that of the Prime Minister. And the Prime Minister's had like half a dozen people in his media team paying to promote these things. I was getting more traffic. And then 2 weeks later, Facebook shut down my entire account. They said they sent me an email, a text message saying, "Oh, sorry, Craig, we've shut down your account. Have a good day." And then they put out a media release to the media saying Craig Kelly's account has been shut down for misinformation. And I pressed, I say, please tell me what I said that was wrong. Please tell me what I said that was misinformation so I can appeal against this. They refused to even answer. So it was not only the mainstream media, it was Facebook. And I later found out through Freedom of Information requests that both the Department of Health and our Department of Home Affairs had been writing to Twitter. So my Facebook account was shut down. Twitter was all I had left. They were writing to Twitter, pressuring Twitter to try and censor me. So just think, so you've got government bureaucracies pressuring these social media platforms to censor an elected member of parliament that is, basically opposition and contradicting the government's policies of the day. That's how dark and Orwellian it became.
Well, it was so dark for me that I actually had YouTube taking down speeches that I'd given in Parliament,
Yes.
posted with the ministerial response, obviously.
Yes.
They took down a load of my speeches from Parliament in the chamber, and I think it was 4.2 million complaints. I banged it out on Twitter that what they'd done, and there were 4.2 million views of that. So many complaints that they had to put them back up a week later. But they tried to even censor what I'd said in the chamber of the House of Commons as an elected member of Parliament.
I had exactly the same thing happen to me. There were several speeches that I gave, and I posted them to YouTube, and nothing more than like the speaker gives the call to I give the call to the member for Hughes. That was what the seat I was the member for. Nothing more than me speaking and then finishing, I thank the House. Nothing more, nothing less, no other commentary, direct from the parliamentary feeds. And to think someone over in probably California, sitting there in YouTube, who's looking, the Australian people can't hear what's there, or Parliament delete and censored it. And
whenever I gave my speeches, and I think I had to apply 26. I don't know if the same, probably the same in your Parliament. You can only put in for a debate once a week. No. And it's got to be a sitting week. Well, it took me 9 months to get the first debate on excess deaths. 9 months. So 26 sitting weeks of applications. There was no way that was never unsuccessful in ballot 26 times. There's not that much interest in speaking, and I didn't mind what the debate was. But the chamber was always empty when I was scheduled to give my speeches about excess deaths or vaccine harms. But the public gallery was always rammed. And we had cheering, which has never been heard before, through the bulletproof glass from the public gallery. And the deputy speaker was in the chair, and she threatened to clear the public gallery, which I've never ever seen before, because they wouldn't stop clapping.
One of my experiences, I actually made a complaint to our Speaker of the Parliament, because my argument was that to censor the proceedings of the House of Parliament, whether it's the House of Commons or the House of Representatives in Australia, that is basically a violation of all the parliamentary principles that have been won by our forefathers, going back to the Magna Carta, that we're meant to be able to stand up in that Parliament and speak fearlessly and frankfully.
Without fear or favour, I think is the
that's
phrase.
Right, without fear or favour. Right? And anyone that interferes in that is engaging in abuse of the Parliament or contempt of the Parliament. Now, I took my complaint to the Speaker of the Parliament, and he wanted nothing to do with it whatsoever. Absolutely terrified. I wanted all he had to do was refer it to the Privileges Committee, right? So it wasn't his job to make a decision on it. He just had to decide if there was a case to be heard, and if so, it had to be then referred to the Privileges Committee. He actually ruled that there was no case, so he basically broke centuries of tradition of parliamentary precedent for the Speaker to try and shut down my complaint, because it was completely simply wrong. Going forward, we can't have the proceedings of our parliaments being censored by entities overseas, foreign companies.
It's incredible, you two. I mean, I could just sit here and listen to this. I knew you two would get on like a house on fire, but this is what we're here to talk about: censorship. Andrew, what do you want to say?
I was going to say that without fear or favour. I mean, my conclusion was that there's an awful lot of fear and an awful lot of favour in the UK Parliament for sure, and the only way I got that first debate authorised on excess deaths in October 23. Which we've been suffering excess deaths since the pandemic, when we should have had less than expected deaths after a pandemic if the weak and the vulnerable had gone early, sadly, was because I did an investigation into thalidomide in the summer of 2023, found out that and made a little mini documentary about it, that it was withdrawn in 1961 for the side effects. But it was 1972 before the word thalidomide was allowed to be spoken in the chamber of the House of Commons. Wow. Of course, it was uncovered in Australia by Nurse Sparrow, the link to thalidomide and the birth defects. And I sent the copy of that documentary I'd made with a note to my speaker, Sir Lindsay Hoyle, and said, we don't want history repeating itself. And in the judgment, the thalidomide was made by Chemie Grunethal, a German company, and they got an injunction on the Times newspaper to stop them writing stories about the side effects. Wow. That was overturned at the Strasbourg court, and 3 judges there, in their judgment, said that successive speakers of the House of Commons had deliberately suppressed all debate on thalidomide for 11 years. And I sent that to our current speaker and said, we certainly don't want history repeating itself, do we? And then he found me a date straight away.
Wow, I wasn't aware. I'd known a lot about the history of thalidomide, but I didn't realise that the Parliament had been trying to censor the criticism of that.
Well, that was the decision of 3 Strasbourg judges.
Wow.
The Parliament had deliberately, and it wouldn't have been just the Speaker, it would have been the whips' offices as well, of course.
Yeah.
So how did the whips treat you in the Conservative Party in Australia?
I was like,
show me your back.
That's right. Well, yeah, one question I want to ask you, what made you, like, was there one event or was there a series of events that made you say, hang on a minute, this is wrong, I've got to speak out?
Well, I'd uncovered the Post Office Horizon scandal when I first arrived in Parliament, which was at the time the biggest miscarriage of justice in UK history at the time. 1,000 people convicted of theft, sub-postmasters. They were forced to use a software system imposed on them by the Post Office, which was full of bugs. And that was a long investigation. And I'd got constituents who were badly affected by that. And I'd seen the cover-up. And then my degree just happened to be in biological sciences, specialising in virology, genetics and behaviour with biochemistry.
Right,
so I understood the papers and just the way that scientists and doctors or commentators were asking legitimate questions about the lockdown policy, the COVID response or the vaccines, the way they were just being cancelled. I mean, that isn't the way science works or politics or democracy. And it just had, and also I'd got all the evidence probably in 2013, 14 with witness statements from Fujitsu whistleblowers on the software system of the Horizon. I offered it to every journalist in the lobby and told them, you'll get an award for this. You just run this story.
Right, yeah, that's what I said. Yeah.
You'll get an award. You'll get an award for this. Because all these people are innocent. Here's all the evidence. Nobody would run it. And when I started talking about the vaccine harms and excess deaths, the response from the journalists who are, in your parliamentary lobby, they're the best journalist jobs in the country, aren't they?
Yes,
they've got the top journalists.
Exactly the same. I said,
fearless, without fear or favour, the sword of truth unsheathed, and it was exactly the same. They all walked away from me. They couldn't run that story. They couldn't run a story. Then I realised it's exactly the same, and yeah. And
Andrew, when the Post Office scandal was being finally brought to the light of the public last year,
10 years
your
later,
name was conspicuously absent, and you were the one who did all the work on it, and
That's
they
right.
took the credit. That made me sick as well.
Well, at the same time as that was actually being allowed to come out in the media in the 10 years after I'd uncovered it. And everything that was in they were talking about then, I'd actually said in the chamber of the House of Commons 10 years before in Hansard. Obviously, I was also then already exposing the vaccine harms and the excess deaths, so they couldn't give me the vindication that I was right about 10 years before, because they just couldn't stand that. They didn't even let me give my evidence to the public inquiry, and they won't let me give my evidence to the public inquiry on the COVID. Well, not this one, but I'll be giving evidence to the next one, I can assure you. It was very interesting that the business minister, he gave evidence. He played himself in the Post Office scandal docudrama. But he was the vaccine minister when it came to the vaccine rollout. I have asked the question. I wonder if he'll want to play himself in the mini drama when the public gets to find out the truth about the vaccine rollout. But I think he'll be fully occupied somewhere else at Her Majesty's pleasure, or His Majesty's pleasure.
What was his name, Andrew?
His name, I'm just trying to remember his name. He was the MP for Stratford-upon-Avon.
They're also forgettable because they're also dishonest. But it's amazing seeing you two for the first time really linking up when your stories are so similar.
I had a similar experience about, how at the time COVID broke, I was actually doing an investigation to our Bureau of Meteorology. And it was clear that they were fudging the data. They were fudging the climate data. In fact, and they were up to all sorts of tricks. And one of the tricks that they did, they tried to wipe out a 50-degree temperature. So we had several temperature recordings of 50 degrees here in Australia throughout history, right? 50 degrees Celsius. And it'd been long, they'd made excuses, but there was one record, it was Vulcania, I think in 1939, they had a 50-degree temperature, and it was accepted. There was absolutely no dispute. They tried to knock it out. There was no dispute whatsoever. Now, the Bureau of Meteorology put out these glossy brochures to send all to the schools that eliminated this 50-degree temperature and had it was like, so they said the highest temperature in New South Wales was like 49.7 or something, 49, right, without the 50-degree. But hang on. How can you actually go and delete this historic record and publish something in the schools? It's false. So I questioned them in the parliamentary process, and they said, it's not digitised. I said, hang on, what does not digitised mean? They said, we haven't got around to converting the old records that are written by hand to put them into our computer database, therefore it doesn't count. This is at the same time.
We've had exactly the same in the UK. The Met Office, who if you actually look at the Met Office board, it's like World Economic Forum Central. And I mean, it's part of the MOD. Our Met Office is part of the MOD. They've got a lot of security around their headquarters in Exeter. And it's now turned out that all this weather data they've been so-called presenting to the public for decades about it's getting warmer and warmer and warmer. A third of the weather stations no longer exist, but they're still putting the data in themselves.
Yeah.
And obviously a lot of because of the housing and development growth, a lot of the weather stations that were formerly in countryside areas are now surrounded by concrete, and that changes it. And these hottest incidents on record turn out to be at RAF Conisbee, seriously, just after 3 jets have RAF jets have taken off for about 10 seconds.
I know.
And we all know what that is. Yeah. But they put them down as these are record temperatures.
Yeah.
Right behind the exhaust of an RAF jet taking off.
I'll give you a story here. Sydney's official temperatures are taken at a place called Observatory Hill. It's basically there were observatories going back to there when the first fleet came. Now, about 2 years ago, we were having our longest run ever since records went back to the early 1800s of a day without 30 degrees. We hadn't had a 30-degree day. It was like for over a year. So now, over Christmas time, I said, I'll go up and have a look where this Observatory Hill is, because it's sort of in a bit of a difficult place to get to. I've never been there. And I went up and the place is all locked up and you can't get into the place. So I've had my iPad and I put my iPad up over the fence to have a look at where the Stevenson screen is, where they measure the temperatures. And lo and behold, right behind the Stevenson screen, there was a solar panel at the perfect angle to reflect the heat back up into the Stevenson screen. Like it was against the meteorological standards, so you're meant to have like a 30-metre exclusion zone with nothing in it. And someone from the Bureau of Meteorology had placed a solar panel right behind the Stevenson screen, right? This is not at some remote location. This is where Sydney's official temperatures are recorded. And they thought they'd get away with it because you couldn't see over the fence. It was only that I stood up and held my iPad like that and sort of filmed, looked around it and came back down, but I could see it. And then 2 weeks later, after we raised the issue on social media, the solar panel mysteriously disappeared. And they said, it had something to do with, we needed more power in the place. Like just complete utter bullshit. They were deliberately trying to fudge Sydney's official temperature record.
When the thing is, they feel very safe to do all this deception because they completely control the mainstream media. So, I mean, you've got the cover, haven't you? You can get away with anything. Well, I mean, get away with murder, and they do. I remember one of the Tory grandees would be John Redwood. You may have heard of him, may not have done. He's retired now. But, I mean, I remember talking to him about this global warming nonsense, man-made global warming nonsense. And he said, he said the research shows it's warming slightly on Mars at the same time, he said, but they're damned if they can find the 4-wheel drives that are causing it.
Or the cows. But maybe there we just pick that up, Andrew, and give people who are not quite with this. Yes, climate change is a rort, just like the COVID pandemic was a rort. Can you just give people an idea, Andrew, of why that and what we're going to talk about tonight ultimately, although we may go off-piste a little bit because it's so interesting. We're going to talk about censorship in lockstep between the UK and Australia. And I'm really worried about New Zealand because we've got Albanese here as of Saturday talking to our Prime Minister. We'll be silenced soon in New Zealand, I bet. What's going on, Andrew?
It is all linked. I mean, what Craig's experience and my experience as elected members of Parliament in chambers where we're supposed to speak on behalf of our constituents and raise any issue without fear or favour, we were even shut down. But the legislation coming in Australia, New Zealand, Europe, the UK,
Canada
now will stifle any public debate or criticism or contradiction of government policy. And without freedom of speech, there is no other freedom, because without freedom of speech, everything falls. And they know that. They know that. So, I mean, they've got this media freedom law being brought in the EU, which Rob Roos, a former MEP, and he's quite rightly pointed out that this law in the EU will give the EU the ability to arrest a journalist if it's deemed to be in the public interest.
Wow.
Well, I mean, who's going to decide what the public interest is, and how do you do that? It's a bit like the meme I put out last weekend, which got 1.3 million views in the UK, and it said, Keir Starmer says, "Of course we've got freedom of speech in the UK, and we'll jail anybody who says we haven't."
Look, we shouldn't laugh about these things. We dodged one bullet down here in Australia before the election campaign. The Albanese government put up a bill which they called the Mis and Disinformation Bill, and it would have effectively created a Ministry of Truth. I know we use these Orwellian terms, but that's exactly what it was. It was going to be a government bureaucracy that would decide what was or wasn't misinformation. And these were people that had got it hopelessly wrong during COVID. And the Albanese government was probably one of the most deceitful, lying governments in the history of our nation. So they wanted to be able to control the speech. They got the legislation through the lower house, the House of Representatives. It went to our Senate, and we needed, there were 6 independent senators that normally vote with the government. And we rallied, we had protests here in the streets. We got a letter writing campaign going, and one by one, every one of those 6 so-called independent senators voted against it, and were able to defeat it by 1 vote. Now, the problem that we've now got is with the new parliament, the government and the Greens party have control. So if they try to put that legislation up again, we just simply not the chance of the numbers to block it. But what they've done at the moment, they've put in this new legislation called age verification. Now, the theory behind it is that the internet is harmful for children under 16. So
we've got the online harms bill, which got royal assent, became law last week. Well, a couple of weeks ago. Can
you explain to me exactly how that works? And I've read a bit about.
Well, we've got age verification on everything. So they're trying to bring in a brick card as well, which will be a digital ID, which they want to make compulsory. And obviously link all that together. They'll know, someone's been watching Andrew Bridgen's videos. We don't want too much of this. And and obviously we've all got the financial crash in it within the next couple of years to come. And if they've got the digital ID, we end up with a central bank digital currency. Once they're all linked together, they've got all the tools for the social scoring system, and that's a digital trap. Which, as I always said, it's always better to avoid a trap than to try and get out of it once we're in it.
Yeah. So at the moment in the UK, if someone's 15 years of age, are they able to have a social media account? Are they able to?
Yes, they are. But everything has to be age verified now.
Right. Okay. And what's
digital ID when you go onto the
Right. So what's the point of the age verification? If
they're saying it's to keep obviously pornography away from children, to protect children. These suicide promoting websites I've never seen one, but they are out there apparently. To shut those down, but I mean they've also done is put massive fines. I mean, I think it's something like £15 million a day. So I mean, obviously, we've actually had some sites have just pulled out of the UK, some American sites, and the Americans are kicking off over their access to our market, quite rightly. But it would, everyone wants to protect children. But I mean, we've got the Muslim rape gang scandal, which the government has resisted ever having a public inquiry in for decades.
Yeah.
But that's the same government that says that if you don't support the online harms bill, you're supporting people like Jimmy Savile, child abusers. Well, I mean, that is just lies.
Well,
there's no government that's less protected children than the one we've currently got.
And let's face it, Andrew, they could silence us and shadow ban posts that we put out when they wanted to during COVID. They could have silenced and shadow banned all the pornography, but they could have done it that way. They don't have to do it this way. Craig, what were you going to say?
Well, what's been proposed here in Australia, and the way they've done it, the bill was passed before the last Parliament, and it is effectively subcontracted out to what we call our e-safety commissioner, which is this notorious American woman named Julie Inman Grant. We nicknamed her e-safety Karen. Right? She's effectively been given the power to work out how this age verification is going to work. Now, come the 10th of December here in Australia, everyone who's under 16 will have their social media accounts shut down. And not only if you don't get your account age verified, you'll be shut down. So my 85-year-old mother will have her account shut down unless she verifies in some way that she's 85 years of age. Now, it's yet to be determined exactly how this will work. And that's been instead of the Parliament doing it, it's been subcontracted out to our e-safety commissioner. Now, it looks like she's going to bring in the most draconian of laws that will require every single Australian to have some form of digital ID and have to undergo a biometric facial scanning every single time that you log onto the internet, and it will repeat after a certain period of time to make sure that it's still you on the screen and not you haven't passed the screen off to someone else. Now, this is meant to happen on the 10th of December. You've got Mr. Albanese in New Zealand at the moment. He's trying to push this scheme around into New Zealand and the rest of the world. And here's the real thing. Here's the real danger about protecting the kids. So what this is going to mean, that every 16-year-old boy and girl in Australia that wants to have set up an internet account is going to have to obtain a digital ID, undergo a biometric facial scan, and that data, that facial scan and biometric facial scan of that 16-year-old Australian child will be held on servers in foreign countries and with TikTok, including China. I don't think you could come up with a scheme that put Australian children in more jeopardy than that. Just imagine a database of every single 16-year-old boy and girl, or almost every single 16-year-old boy and girl, their biometric facial scans on a database in a foreign country. That's what's being proposed here in Australia.
And it's not just that, it'll be a retinal scan, it'll be a palm, it'll be your palm, and as you say, an 85-year-old woman having to go through this, or a man, and every time we use the online platforms, we will have to be reminded you are being surveilled. You are in an open-air prison right now. That's what, I believe that's the message they want to send us.
We've already got that coming in UK, and I've experienced it myself. I've had to move the house I'm renting a couple of times in the last 3 years, and when you move, obviously you've got to change documents like driving license address and vehicle registration addresses, and I had to move about 3 months ago. Now you have to access a portal, and it's called One Government, and it's digital ID. I refused to do it, so I had to go and take my docs to a post office 11 miles away.
Wow.
And have it done in person. But that is the way it's going. You will not be able to access any government services without basically going through a digital ID system. That's for everybody, every time.
In the land of John Stuart Mill, George Orwell, the people where they gave us where the Magna Carta came from, it is truly frightening to think. I think
and the English Bill of Rights and the English Constitution.
Yes. Yeah.
No one talks about England anymore. We have to be British because they don't want us to realise that successive governments have ridden a coach and horses through the English Bill of Rights, which of course was the basis for the American Constitution. That was based on the English Bill of Rights. They don't want us to go back to that because it would expose that they've, rights are inalienable. What they're trying to do, I think they're doing it across the so-called developed world. They're trying to make people forget their rights and replace them with privileges, because of course, if you don't, privileges can be removed if like a naughty schoolboy, you have to be punished. But whereas rights are inalienable, you can't take someone's rights away. You can't sign them away either.
Well, that's the fight we're up against. We're fighting against people that believe the only rights that you have are what are granted to you by government.
Yes.
Instead of being the other way
Well, they're privileges, aren't they? And
we are free people.
but also, isn't it? I always thought, my home area of northwest Leicestershire. I was here as the servant of the people, not their master. That's not the attitude of politicians in the UK now.
Yeah, I know.
The relationship's completely changed. I thought we came into government to make things better for our people and the country. And now the people just sit there thinking, what are they going to inflict on us next?
And on that note, let's have a look at Karen. Do you call them Karens in the UK?
We know the phrase. We certainly know the phrase.
You know what a Karen is. Well,
I don't use it a lot myself, I must admit, but I do know what the phrase means.
As a woman, I've met Karens, and they really lived up to their name. Okay, so let's look at this safety commissioner, how patronising she is, how she treats Australians who were once a very feisty nation like little school children. Let's have a look at this.
So, your frustration with this is clear and understandable. What happens when these bigger tech companies just don't answer some of these questions, aren't doing what they should? What are the consequences? What powers do you have here?
Well, we now have some new powers around codes and standards, and with the passage in November of the Social Media Minimum Age Bill means that codes and standards violations, I can fine these companies up to $49.5 million for violations. So we've just put together an enforcement task force and are looking at the platforms that we are going to target. But, this is not just, we'll end up playing a game of whack-a-mole. We're just one small country with a relatively small regulator. If you look at Ofcom, which is the UK sister regulator of ours, they just set up their Online Safety Act in 2023 and already have double the staff. So they've got about 500 people to our 250. So to take on not only this many powerful companies, but if you think of the, broader universe of websites and dating sites and gaming platforms and wily perpetrators, we really need a lot more global regulatory coherence and partnership to tackle this.
Yeah.
And as you said earlier, the amount of the fines and her attitude, we have a lot of work to do to silence all these people. It's just so patronizing. It's extraordinary that they've elevated themselves. Now, Andrew, the big thing with her is she's judge, jury, and executioner. She answers to nobody, and she is not able to be voted out because she hasn't been voted in.
Absolutely.
Plus, she's not even an Australian. She's been invited in to another country, and she's dictating to them what they can speak. I believe this is a test. If they get away with it in Australia, there'll be someone like this from the WEF in the UK and in New Zealand. It's horrific.
Well, power without accountability, there's another word for that, it's called tyranny. That's what happens. But I mean, we've had foreign nationals. We had Mark Carney, who was head of the Bank of England for a number of years and did an awful lot of damage to our economy before they pulled him back to finish Canada off completely after Trudeau. They're gaming everything out. They've got their pieces on the board, and they're using them. It's time for people to wake up now because the net is closing on us. And as I say, it's far easier to avoid this digital trap by not taking the digital ID and the censorship than to get out of the trap once we're in it, because we are going to be heading, as soon as they've got us all on digital ID, then they're okay to crash the monetary system, and move to a central bank digital currency and just link the two up. That is the plan, and that is the timescale. And the fact that we're in lockstep again across the world. It seems to be this is censorship. End of 2025. It's all about censorship. That tells me they've got something else in the pipeline planned for us all as soon as they get their control of freedom of speech.
Yeah. The parallels that are what is happening, especially in all the British Commonwealth countries, is uncanny. This has to be centrally planned, has to be centrally coordinated. You can't have all of our nations putting in these Orwellian attacks on our freedoms just by coincidence.
Well, we were under lockstep on the net zero nonsense. We were under lockstep during COVID. We all of our countries, we had long prepared pandemic response documents. I think the one in the UK had been prepared over 3 decades, which we all threw in the bin and went with the WHO recommendations of lockdowns, mandates, masks and social distancing, and we all terribly damaged our mental health, public health and our economies. Although our politicians couldn't have gone completely mad at the same time and picked the same aberrative behaviour.
Yeah. Look, during COVID, I was, for the first time in my life, I was embarrassed to be an Australian. The way that the majority of the people just rolled over and accepted this and, govern me harder, daddy sort of expressions. It was the Australia that I had grown up in and known as where we're a outgoing, feisty, a disdain for authority type of people. And that was our great strength. That Australia died during COVID. But I'm hoping that this digital ID, I'm hoping that more and more people are waking up every day. And I'm hoping that once this eSafety Karen unveils the plan that she's got, that people will rise up and we'll get that Australian spirit back. Because this has happened before in our history. We had a thing called the Australia Card back in 1987 that they tried to roll out, a similar thing to the digital ID. If we even go back in our history to back in the 80s, it was 1854, the Eureka Stockade, where they forced people to have miners' licenses as an identification, and they would the police would go around. It was the old British police back then in Australia. The colonial police would go around and demand people to present their miner's license, otherwise they were taken away in jail. Look, I think hopefully that is still in our DNA, and hopefully if enough people can work this out, what is happening, we can get up and we can really protest at the end of this year to try and stop this happening.
But Craig, you use the word disdain. I want to play here a real WEFer, somebody really behind, an architect of the whole WEF evil, and that is Noah Yuval Harari. And he's just disgusting here. Listen to some of the things he's saying. You need to get most people to believe in the same story, otherwise it does not work. That's why we must all stand up to digital ID and realize how evil it is. He says, those who own the data really own the future. And he says, all you need to systematically hack millions of people is really some data. And finally, in Israel, we have this big laboratory, he calls it, of surveillance called the Occupied Territories, where we have 2.5 million guinea pigs. Let's have a listen.
In order to collaborate on a large scale, you need to convince everybody to believe in the same story. What really the engine of history is stories. And they don't even need to be true. Right. Some of the most powerful stories in history were fictions. Right. But you need to get everybody, or at least a significant part of the population, to believe in the same story. Otherwise, it doesn't work.
Science is not really, at least this is my view as a historian, science is not really about truth. It's about power. The real aim of science as a project, as an establishment, is not truth, it's power. Particular individuals, particular scientists may be very interested in the truth, personally. But as an institution, the real aim of science is power.
Those who own the data really own the future. Mm-hmm. We are reaching a point in human history that we have enough biological knowledge and we have enough computing power, and all you need in order to systematically hack millions of people is just the data. Mm-hmm. That to hack people means to know people better than they know themselves. Right. To somebody in San Francisco, in Beijing, knows you, knows more about you than you know about yourself, about your medical condition, about your mental weaknesses, things that you did 5 years ago, 20 years ago, you completely forgot about them, they know it.
Right.
This is something we never faced before. Not even the KGB could do it.
Right.
And we are already beginning to see the emergence of such total surveillance regimes in places like Xinjiang, in places like in my own home country in Israel. We have this big laboratory of surveillance called the occupied territories, where you have 2.5 million guinea pigs of how to completely survey and control a population with very few soldiers. I mean, when you look at the numbers, it's amazing how few soldiers you need to control millions of people if you have their data.
And talk about disdain for human beings. That is what the WEF are like, the World Economic Forum, and I can say the United Nations, which I think need to be shut down urgently. Andrew, your views?
Well, the globalists have taken control of the supranational bodies, the United Nations, the WHO, they're no longer serving the function for which they were created after the end of the Second World War. We've got the WHO, Dr. Tedros. I mean, only there because of an unholy alliance between Bill Gates and the Chinese Communist Party.
That's right. We've got an Ethiopian Marxist telling us how we should run our health systems.
Who we can't get rid of.
You couldn't.
We didn't vote for.
If George Orwell was alive today, he wouldn't even be able to make that up. He wouldn't be that clever.
No, I mean, I spoke all over Europe opposing the WHO pandemic treaty and the amendments to international health regulations, pointing out that, the sovereignty belonged to the people and it wasn't any politicians to give that away to the WHO or anybody else. And if you felt like that, you should resign. You don't deserve a place in any elected assembly anywhere in the world because you're just betraying your people.
Well, I campaigned against that. There were issues in the 2022 election and the 2025 election and couldn't get any traction. The only article that they printed about it was that I'd gone off onto some strange conspiracy theory about what was happening, sort of thing. It was
the only debates we had in the UK Parliament were by public petition, so ones that had got over 100,000 online signatures. Otherwise, we wouldn't have had a debate about any of the WHO instruments, and the debates were very sparsely attended. I mean, again, the public turned out, but not the politicians. It's amazing how when the whips tell them that we don't want you speaking in this debate, that they can make themselves scarce. And we had an urgent question about it, which we actually did get in, and it was just before the general election. And it's the only time I've ever seen not one backbench Labour MP turn up to a debate. So they had to have someone on the front bench and a whip, but there were no backbenchers, so there were no contributions in that debate from the Labour Party. And I knew from that the Labour Party were completely in favour of the WHO pandemic treaty and the amendments to international health regulations. That's why they didn't want any of their MPs there. They didn't want to talk about it, but they were completely up for it.
I hope we
they always say it's about cooperation with other countries. It wasn't about cooperation. It was about capitulation of democracy.
Yes. I hope we can compare your results in the elections towards the end of this discussion too, because there are vast similarities there.
That's what I want to ask you.
Well, no, they fixed my election here. There was pure election fraud.
I thought I did
3%, 63% down to 3%.
Yeah. I thought I got. If I had the resources and the time, I was almost thinking of like coming over and giving you a hand to campaign, because I'd been through a similar campaign here in Sydney where I was the sitting member and won 4 elections in a row and increased
4 elections in a row,
and increased the majority every single time. And
every single time,
I was sitting on about a 2-party preferred vote, about a 60-40 vote sort of thing, And I thought there's been a tradition of sitting members of parliament that have resigned from their seats and run as sort of like independents and have won, have been successful. There's a couple of cases here in Australia. There's a recent case. One guy, he's now in prison. He's the first member of parliament to be jailed. He was arrested for child sex offences, kicked out of his party, ran as an independent, and won. Still was re-elected with, okay, yes, there were allegations, and he was still before the courts, and he deserves the presumption of innocence. But his electors were prepared to re-elect him, even though he was up on these abhorrent sex offences. He's since been found guilty. He's now in prison, locked up in one of the cells here in New South Wales.
He sounds like he's approved by the establishment, really.
That's right. And there was another guy in South Australia that was up for embezzling millions of dollars from the state government over there, and he ran as independent. He won his seat. So I thought, look, even if you've done a few things wrong, as an independent that's been there for several terms, running in your seat against the narrative, at least there should be some residual goodwill towards you.
My recognition on the doorsteps was over 90% by name. Yeah. And you've got to bear in mind that myself and a group of friends who went on the council locally, which is coterminous with my seat, we set out to do this to improve the area. North West Leicestershire was always considered the poorest area of Leicestershire. After 12 years in office, we're the richest. Yeah. We're the only part of Leicestershire now. We converted it to the only part of Leicestershire with above average UK household incomes. So we moved an area that was Colville, the most a gritty ex-mining town, the most deprived town in Leicestershire. We converted that whole area to the richest. We've got 1.2 jobs for everyone of working age. So we have to import labour all the time. So that keeps the wages going up. And we built enough new houses of good quality to keep the house prices 30% below UK average. So my people were in the sweet spot. They've got disposable income. And it was the happiest place to live in the Midlands, which used to be the most deprived seat in Leicestershire. We'd done all that, and then I'd stood up for them. I remember the BBC when I stood up and stopped the government from vaccinating down to 5 to 6 months in the UK. The BBC had me on for the last time before they cancelled me and said, "Andrew, why are you willing to sacrifice your political career on the hill of vaccine harms?" I said, "Because that's the hill you're killing my people on."
That's right.
Yeah. And that was and
it's
I would say that 70%. When I went around the doorsteps, I would say 70. But even last July, 70% of the people in North West Leicestershire knew there was something seriously wrong with those vaccines.
What's the size of your electorate? How many people vote in it?
We just had a boundary change, so my seat got a bit smaller. I hadn't gained anywhere. I'd only lost a little bit of rural area, but it didn't matter because in the 19 election I won in every ballot box in every polling station, and so we were down to about 78,000 voters.
Right, a bit smaller. And you only got through. I just couldn't believe it when I saw.
So despite the seat getting slightly smaller. So we went. This is minute size of area. So up at Sydney, you'll be all urban, but my seat had traditionally been about 120 square miles. We're down to just over 100 square miles. It's not that big. We always got the ballot boxes in 35 minutes maximum. There's nowhere more than 25 minutes drive from where we count in the middle of the constituency. And the returning officer this time got up shaking. She could barely speak because she knew I think her conscience was, and she said, "I'm going to have to make an announcement. We might not get onto the count proper until 2 a.m. This is at 10 o'clock. 4 hours." And she said, "It's going to take a long time tonight to bring the ballot boxes in." That's because they took the ballot boxes somewhere else. They hoofed my votes out. I never saw any of the ballot boxes opened. I think they were all open when they got here. They cordoned off a big part of the car park with security guards and I said, "What's all that for? 100 car parkings." "Oh, that's where the ballot boxes are coming in. We don't want anyone near the ballot boxes." They meant they didn't want anyone near the people bringing the ballot boxes in. That's what they didn't want. And yeah, that's the votes were right. Mine got 3% of the votes, but one of the ballot boxes, they must have, obviously they hoofed my votes out. They had to put votes in to make up for other people. Yeah. They overstuffed the ballot box. There was a load more ballots in there than they were given out in the polling station. I'm not quite sure how that could ever work. You could end up with a lot more votes.
Wow. So our system here in Australia is a little bit different. We have the majority of the votes that are cast. So we use our school halls as the polling locations generally. They might use the odd church hall, but majority are the school halls. And the votes are actually, the ballot boxes are tipped up and counted on the day in the school hall. So you're saying in the
ours
UK,
are all centralised.
So there's a period.
So it's about the custody of that ballot box, taking it from before it gets, and that's, I mean, the polls shut at 10 o'clock. Why did it take hours to get the ballot boxes this time to the counting area? That's because they had to go somewhere else. And also, Craig, what's very interesting is a couple of days after the election, I got a phone call, and we have Ipsos Mori, the polling people, they do the exit poll.
Yes.
And a guy rang me and he said, you know, my wife and I voted for you. I mean, they all voted for me. Yeah. They tell me. And he said, I need to tell you, I work for Ipsos Mori, and my job was to do the exit poll in northwest Leicestershire on the night. He said, and we've got everything organised, we've got everyone recruited. And he said, I knew, like, during the election campaign, that the whole organisation of Ipsos Mori, they were struggling to get enough people to man all these polling stations all over the country to do the exit poll. We said, but we were all sorted in your area, and that they stand there from 7 in the morning till 10 at night, and they count the people out of the polling station, and they ask every fourth person who they voted for, and then that's the result. They send off to London. And he said, and inexplicably, he said 2 weeks before the election, he took a phone call from his boss, and he said, stand down, we don't want to poll northwest Leicestershire. Well, they couldn't poll it, could they? Because it wouldn't have been the same result. Now, the polling station they'd chosen to poll, which they got cancelled, I voted there myself. And when I went at 7:30 in the morning, there were 5 people in the queue behind me. And believe it or not, Craig, I voted for me like I always do. But before I got to the car, 2 of the people in the queue behind me had already come and told me they voted for me. So I knew I'd got half the queue of 6, but I'd got half the votes. That meant the next 94 people who came in, nobody voted for me because I only got 3% of the votes.
So you would have been, look, where you're out on the ground, it's a smaller election.
Yeah, it was brilliant. I thought I'd win it was going to be a 4-way fight, and I thought I'd win with about 35% of the vote. Easy.
And you got 3. That's extraordinary that there's that security of custody.
And the whole elections department at the local council, a year before the election, when I said I'm going to stand as an independent, on a Friday, the whole elections department resigned and were replaced by a whole new team. How often does that happen in local government, where the whole department goes?
Wow.
And I found out that the council had relocated to new offices, and the only department they left on their own, unsupervised, for the 6 months run up to the election was the new elections department, with no supervision. They're in a great big empty building full of empty offices.
Wow. So when they give you that final count of the votes, do they give you a breakdown per polling booth?
No.
Right. So you can't.
My votes dropped from, I think, 34,000 to 1,558.
So it's just an overall figure. Right. So you can't tell. So you would have known that you would have been stronger in some areas and perhaps weaker in other booths as well. So you would have been able to detect.
Well, I went 3 months after the election. I went to the biggest supermarket in my constituency, which is in Ashby-de-la-Zouch, and in the 40 minutes I was walking round, people who came up to me, I didn't canvass anybody, that had to have been 2% of my voters in that supermarket for the 40 minutes on a certain Saturday, because these people all declared to me, we voted for you. That was just people who came up to me. I didn't canvass anybody. So
wow.
Those things can't happen, can they?
I had no idea that your British electoral system was so open to actually corruption and fraud like that.
No, neither did I. Next time round, I'm going to put my own seals on every ballot box at every polling station and tell the returning officer that you're not to open any of these seals without my people being present and checking the numbers on them. Yeah. But I thought we had an honest system, and I was, but that's what they work on.
I
got a journalist who knows the people at Ipsos Mori, and rang them up and said, I started asking them general questions about the about the process of the exit poll, and that was fine. And the emails were coming straight back. It was like, ping pong, 4 or 5 emails. And then as soon as she put the question in, can you tell me why you pulled out of polling Northwest Leicestershire 2 weeks before the election? That was it. There was no more correspondence and no more emails coming out.
Wow. So it's so easy I can see, to cheat because you've just got this general number. You don't have to sort of accurately cheat.
We've also got a case at a by-election in Runcorn and Helsby where an independent is taking them, and it actually turned out that the Reform Party won by 5 votes, so it was a very close election, and this guy only got 50 votes, and he gets 50 votes in every election, and he can't work out how. It doesn't matter where he stands, he only gets 50 votes. So he's bought and what someone did spot them doing was vote sandwiching, where when they collected the votes, they'd put a big wodge of somebody's votes in the middle, and then just the preferred party had just got a few either side, and they bundled that up, and that was all then put down as a mistake. It's a mistake. It was a mistake. They got caught. You mean?
Yeah. So you can't even have scrutineers to watch the ballot box.
We do, but it's all down. You can't. The votes are bundled and put into cages with names on them in the middle. You can't touch it. And mysteriously, my re-election campaign last July, where it was a complete disaster, when I asked, there was obviously a number of independent filmmakers wanted to come and film my victory.
Yes, yeah. And
the returning officer said, no, we're not having any film crews at the count. Well, I mean, we always have film crews at the count, don't we?
Mm.
Not this time.
I mean, 10 years ago or 20 years
Anyone
ago,
would have thought they had something to hide.
Yeah, if we'd heard all these stories, we would have thought it was some corrupt African nation. Back to you, Craig. Just tell us, so you heard about these 2 politicians, or we know about these 2 politicians who got in with embezzlement and child sexual assault charges on them. How did you go as an independent?
Well,
what was your outcome?
I got 8%, just under 8%, which was the worst result of, I think, a sitting member in Federation. So that's not a bad record to have. But look, my reputation was shredded in the media. I couldn't get any crack through in the media whatsoever. It was all online. I had my Facebook account was shut down. So I'm trying to compete in the election campaign, and I don't have access to Facebook, but the people I'm running against do. So how is that a free and fair election?
And this was punishment because you spoke out against the
jabs,
jabs,
I'd
Craig.
spoken out. I was, labelled terrible anti-vax. And remember, this was in May 2022. So this was when the vaccine hysteria was still at a great high. I believe that if the election had been a bit later, I would have had a much better chance. But at that time, the sentiment was still very much, anyone that didn't inject the magic juice into them had something wrong with them, sort of thing. So I basically feel that everyone that voted for me didn't get the vaccine, and everyone that voted against me did. And even if they knew that they were forced or coerced, or they shouldn't have taken it, they didn't want to. Voting for me was an admission that they'd made a terrible error, and they'd rather have not made that admission. So I just stood no chance. I don't believe mine was the electoral commission. I believe it was the media that just didn't give us. But the funny thing happened to me during talking about how the electoral commission gets involved in these things. On the night of the election campaign, so this is our elections on the Saturday. So Friday night at 8:30, I get a call from the chairman, Mr. Palmer, who was running at the time the United Australia Party. He said to me, there's a court case going on. You may not be able to campaign tomorrow. And I just thought it was one of his bad jokes. And it was pouring down rain. And the night before the election at 8 o'clock, it's chaos sort of thing. You're running around trying to organise 40 booths and people everywhere and sort of thing. But I just thought it was one of his bad jokes. And he rang me about 10th and he said, you've won the case. It's okay. You don't have to worry. And I'm going, what are you talking about? And I sort of just forgot all about it. Anyhow, what actually happened, the Australian Electoral Commission went to the federal court at 7:30 at night before the election campaign, seeking an urgent interim injunction that I not be allowed to campaign on election day until like 4 o'clock in the afternoon. I had to go around and check for so-called non-compliant signs, and if I had have actually campaigned, I would have been in contempt of court and could have been jailed. That's what they did to me before
You obviously scared them, Craig.
On the night of the election campaign. And then even
You obviously,
luckily the judge threw that out. And this is the judge made the decision at night at 10:30 at night before the election campaign, with the polling open at 8 o'clock in the morning.
the nearest I had to that was that I had paid the Church of England, and we've got a lovely spot called Bredon on the Hill, which is a church on top of the hill. It's a great spot. You can see for miles. And I'd filmed a few promotional videos up there, all very good, that had been very popular. And I paid the Church of England for filming rights. Yeah. During the election campaign, the Leicestershire Diocese of the Church of England, their lawyers contacted me and said, we don't like what you're saying, so we want all the videos that have got the church in the background to be taken down. That was during the election campaign, and that was all my election address and everything. And I had to get my barrister had to write to them, said, you've taken money to give Mr. Bridgen the thing. And they wrote again and again and again. And in the end, we threatened them that it was electoral interference if you but to threaten the local diocese with electoral interference to stop them keep writing and ringing up my office.
Yeah.
And you put
to get my
that
videos
together
taken down that I'd paid them a donation for the right to film.
Put that together with how collapsed the churches were in COVID when they should have stood up for people. No, we won't have the bottle. We won't have
that
the
singing with a
bottle
mask
shops
on
open.
did me. I couldn't go to church and sing with a mask on.
Well, in New Zealand, we had all our bottle shops open, and all our
Churches,
able
churches
to buy
are closed,
alcohol, but
the
no
pubs and the
churches.
brothels are open.
Yeah, terrible. A friend of mine, the vicar, called the police because he insisted on going to church without a mask. I mean, it's just disgusting. So in terms of Craig, I feel that 8% was also just awarded to you. I would say there is corruption. But 11 weeks out from the last election.
So you actually count your votes in the polling station.
Yes, so we have a different method, a substantially different method to what they have in the UK. Remember, I said ours was in May 2022. So they knew I knew that I couldn't win. I was basically.
So you had to have representatives at every single polling station to watch the count.
Yes. So the way our system works is that there's what we have a pre-poll and early vote, which there's question marks over, but then you can map the trends. And the beauty is we've got about 40. So in my electorate, we had about 40 different booths. So I would know from election to election where there was a particular trend going on, and if there was cheating at one booth, I'd be able to detect that because you would have an anomalous swing in that booth that didn't show up anywhere else, and there have to be some reason for it. You could also make sure that the numbers of people voting were consistent with each booth. So what happens here in Australia, at the end of the polling booths close up at 6 o'clock, they shut the doors right on 6 o'clock. Each candidate is allowed to have scrutineers in the polling booth, and they basically get the ballot boxes. Now, I'd like to see those ballot boxes in a transparent plastic so you can actually see them being, from the word go, there's nothing, you can see them being added up to the day, but they're cardboard, they're non-transparent. They basically open the ballot box up, they tip them up on a table, and as a scrutineer, you can't touch the ballot papers, you can't touch the table, but you can stand there and bend over them. And you can question, you can say, look, I'll check that vote. And then the counters will sort of put them all in different booths. So you'll then get a result per booth. So every single ballot box that is opened up, there's almost like a security of checking from the way, although there's that gap that it could be pre-populated. Now, I'm not suggesting that, but that is still a potential why the ballot boxes should.
You're a much bigger country, so I suppose you've got a big spread of polling stations. If they had to amalgamate all the boxes, centralise them, it would take a long time. Yeah. I mean, UK, we're not in that situation. So,
but the chances of electoral fraud, which you've got in that UK system, which is the first I've heard of this, you've got that period where there's no security of custody of the vote.
Well, there should be, but yeah.
So this would be queried quite easy if you wanted to. I just slip this ballot box out, slip this ballot box in, or here stuff a few more votes in it and pull some. Let's go through them, pull all the ones that bring them out, and put some other ones in.
I think what we're looking at here is We're looking at major voter fraud on the voters across the Commonwealth, across the Five Eyes countries, potentially. We know in America it happened with Biden getting in. I think they simply have so little respect, as we saw with Harare, for the people. They've gone, oh, let's just cheat the elections. 11 weeks out, I put a party up, and the people really got behind it at our last New Zealand election. Now, I went to the Electoral Commission 3 times, and one of those times I had clear evidence of vote farming in retirement homes. And I won't go into the details, and I also had very clear recorded evidence of votes being taken from Alzheimer's patients there, and basically the paper being ticked by the party that went in to the old people's home. It was National Party, and they got in subsequently. I took that to the Electoral Commission. He just raised one eyebrow and said, oh, there's nothing we can really do. Now, it's really the whole system, I realised, is so corrupt, so broken, that we are going to have to come up with a new system. But this exposure is important. And again, what have we got? 3 different countries, lockstep. We've got reports that all match up, haven't we?
Well, it's important that you have a system that there's no question. That's you've got to have. Now, what Andrew describes that's happening in the UK, you cannot guarantee that the system hasn't been tampered with, because you don't have a full security through the system. There's not independent scrutineers keeping their eyes on the ballot paper.
Well, I could never get an answer as to why this election, when the seat had actually got smaller, not bigger, it was suddenly going to take multiple times longer to bring the ballot. No one can answer that question.
Wow. And how many booths would you have in your electorate?
We would probably have 60.
60, right? Okay, yeah. But some would be much larger than the others. So
some would have more. Yeah, some would have more than one box. Yeah, because they'd fill a box and they'd have another box. But I mean, it's still only one trip. You wouldn't take one box and you're going to the polling station. You pick the boxes up. I mean, normally the people at the polling station would drive them in their car to the central collation area. But I mean, clearly this time a lot of time was involved, and they knew in advance it was going to take a long time, because she announced it at 10 o'clock.
Yeah, surely they take a long time.
That means it's planned. It wasn't, and that something happened, and that it took a long time to get some of the ballot boxes in.
Yeah. Surely today you put like a geo tracking system on the ballot box.
You could easily do that. Yeah.
Okay, yes. Someone's driving
in the UK. You do have the right, though. Every candidate has the right to put his own seals on every ballot box, and you could say, I don't want those seals. Those only be broken in our presence.
Right, and you didn't do that at the last election.
I didn't think it was possible that they were going to do that to me.
Wow,
it's interesting. I bumped into, obviously, being the MP for 14 years. I'd had a fair few heads of local police in the area, and one of them, long retired. I bumped into him at a filling station. And he came over to me, recognised me. I probably hasn't served for 8 years, retired. And he said, "How are you getting on?" And I said, I'm pretty upset about what happened at the election fraud." And he just looked me in the eye and he said, "Andrew, given what you've said in Parliament," he said, "what did you expect them to do to you?"
Wow. Wow.
It's disgraceful. If there's anybody in either Australia or the UK, particularly in Craig and Andrew's electorates, who would like, where your conscience is getting to, and you would like to even anonymously tell me what you know, liz.gunn@freenz.org. Please contact me. It will weigh on the consciences of some people.
It's interesting.
It will.
In the UK, you only have 21 days, Craig, to object to a result. So I can't do anything about that, the result. But there's no statute of limitations on election fraud, and this is a fraud, I believe, in the UK that somewhere between 10 and 20 people must have been involved in it to carry it out.
I just find it statistically impossible that you can get
those people who know about it, that fraud, will be looking over their shoulder for the rest of their lives.
Yeah.
Exactly.
It's not going to go away, and there is going to be a whistleblower one day.
Yeah.
I mean, it won't change the result, but those people will be liable.
Yeah, as a sitting MP, and what it was 2023 elections, so there was enough period had gone by to expose enough of this question mark over COVID. To me, it's absolutely impossible that you could only get 3%. Absolutely statistically impossible.
Yeah.
So what's
there were so many people turned up to my speeches in Parliament that we used to overfill the public gallery by a couple of hundred. I used to have to go and give the speech in Parliament Square outside afterwards for the people who turned up who couldn't get into the public gallery because it was rammed.
Wow. Amazing, yeah. And what's your plans? When's the next UK election? And what's your plans?
2029. But I'm still working as an anti-corruption. I'm exposing judicial corruption, which is endemic in the UK, unfortunately. I've just produced a documentary with Urban Scoop. That's Tommy Robinson's film crew. While he was in prison, otherwise engaged, I went and did on child trafficking from Ukraine to the UK with the coercion with the help of our institutions over here. And last night, you may have heard we've got this sort of dinghy invasion across the channel.
I just look at that.
We're getting 800 a day. I've just put out yesterday, and if Liz, if you can put that clip out.
So last night, I noticed there was a whole batch. Yeah, hang on, I have to go back because there's someone coming. There was a whole batch of dinghies in the little area near the crane in the boatyard. Loads of them, all numbered. You'll have just seen that clip, hopefully. And I thought, okay, tomorrow the lorry's probably going to come. And guess what? There it is. There's the lorry. Alright. So I'm going to go and wander over there and just see if it's the same truck. Alright, today we're going to try and follow it. There it is. The lorry is leaving. But that is the lorry, basically, with all the dinghies on it. And if my idea is correct, that lorry is going to France. That's the lorry. Okay, so I'm going to prove it. Right, so that is getting on a ferry. Where to? That's the question, look. Okay, can you see the number plate? Ah, come on. RX68 YKA. Alright, that's it. Boom. Okay, I'm inside. I saw the lorry. It was just the other side of that fence. I'm now going to drive round. Now, what is it doing? Hiding there. There it is. There it is. RX68, there's a driver in it, so he's going to see me doing this. And I don't care. There's the number plate. RX68 YKA. This lorry is getting on a ferry. So the dinghies come into Dover, they get loaded onto a truck, they go back to France.
It's evidence that was given to me a couple of weeks ago, which we've edited up. It's actually from 2023. But it basically shows government agencies loading the dinghies back onto articulated lorries. Craig, they're not even deflating them because they're for immediate reuse and shipping them straight back to France for recycling.
Look, we had a similar problem here with, luckily we're a little bit more geographically isolated, but we had a similar problem here back in...
And you've got more sharks than we've got.
That's right, yeah. And so what was happening, the boats were departing from, people were travelling all out from around the world to Indonesia, getting on a boat, a fishing vessel in Indonesia and heading to Christmas Island, which is an island which is part of the Australian territories. And from that was able then to get them like, oh yes, I'm seeking asylum, I throw their passport overboard them. At the Tony Abbott government I was part of, we were able to stop that. There's a couple of things we did, we were able to. But since then, so since we stopped this illegal migration, the Albanese government has picked migration up. In the first 2 years of their last government, we had a net migration rate of 1 million people. So only 25 million people, and we've had 1 million people he's imported into the country in just the first 2 years of government. We still don't have the data. They went to the election promising, oh, we're going to reduce, we're going to cut the migration back, and the the early data appears that they've lied about that. That's just another thing that they've lied to the Australian people about. And what we do know,
another thing we're in lockstep with around the world, that we're all taking in lots of illegal, uncontrolled migration.
Yeah.
We've or legalized. We're doing the legalized one. That's interesting, Craig. They've legalized it. We had 900,000 under John Key, and we're a population of only 3.5 million. So John Key really started it, and now Luxon has opened the floodgates to India and said, come on in legally. Whereas in the UK, it's designated illegal, but it might as well be legal. This is all lockstep, everything we're looking at.
What we've found in the studies and surveys have shown, a lot of the new migrants tend to vote to the left side of politics.
84% of new migrants vote for the left. Yes, that's what we find.
Yeah. So the Labor side of politics.
Then they realise how it all works, and they vote to the right.
That's right. It takes a while.
That's like that story, isn't it? You know, the story about these puppies. Said that my dogs had a litter of puppies, and they're all they're newborns, and they're all liberals. And then a couple of weeks later, he said that my dogs had some puppies, and now they're all conservatives. He says, "Well, you said they were liberals when they were born." He says, "Yeah, but they've got their eyes open now."
That's right.
But you know, in Victoria, these migrants, Craig was telling me last week, Andrew, are running around with machetes. In the UK, they're running around raping. The most horrendous stories of rape and drugging of 12-year-old girls.
8-year-old girls, 12-year-old girls. And they're getting off with very small sentences for it. There's no deterrent.
It is worse if you say something online in the UK than if you rape and drug an 8-year-old girl.
We had a little incident of the bias reporting. So an immigrant gentleman decided to take his trousers off on the London tube. And
he's no gentleman. He's no gentleman.
And he was videoed by these people. He was then threatened by some of our indigenous male population and told to get his trousers up. And then he was hoofed off the tube and arrested by them on a citizen's arrest. And the headline in the paper said, "Immigrant with mental health problems attacked on tube." That was the headline in the papers.
Yeah.
And it's Malcolm X, Craig. His great quote. He said that the media in the world have the most power because they have the power to make the innocent guilty and the guilty innocent. And you know, and I know, that when they want to smear you, that's exactly what happens.
Look, even here in Australia, what I'd say our conservative side of the media, we had a radio station in Sydney that was 2GB that I appeared on many, many times, over a decade. They were out smearing me and attacking me and wouldn't have me on to be able to defend myself. We had the Australian newspaper, Robert Murdoch's newspaper, again, turned dark during that COVID period, would write articles attacking me, article after article after article, hit job after hit job after hit job, and against all, correct, journalistic standards, wouldn't even give me the opportunity to reply or put my side of the case in these articles. It was just hit job after hit job. And that's when that happens, you see the power that they have when they come after you. It's very hard to fight back against it. And I think that's why they are so desperate to try and shut down the social media platforms and quieten the social media platforms so they can maintain control through a small number of, sort of a mainstream media platforms. And that's why we've got to fight so hard against all these things that they're planning to bring in, especially with this digital ID. And I've seen the arrests in the UK. Was it 100 arrests a day? They're arresting people in the UK for the whole police department surveilling.
We've had about 3,000-4,000 people get prison convictions for social media posts.
Wow!
And these rapists, these immigrant rapists, are not getting the same sentences as people for hurty words on social media.
Andrew, I'm really worried about your farmers, and it's terrible for farmers in New Zealand and Australia. Again, lockstep. But
We've got a war on food production around the world.
Yeah, but I think there was an elderly farmer who chained himself to his fence and he's been arrested, and Starmer's doubling down. I was listening to something today saying Starmer's saying, oh, well, there'll be a bit of disruption, but everybody will settle down soon.
Well, we've had farmers who were diagnosed with cancer, and they've said, I don't want any treatment. I want to die quickly so that my family can inherit the farm without paying the tax.
Wow.
It's disgusting. It is absolutely disgusting. On those boats, I think there was the second part of that coming out today, wasn't there, Andrew?
Yeah, I'm going to be pointing out that the guy who sent me the clip was a guy called Ian Simpson. A couple of weeks ago, I've edited it. He actually filmed it in 2023, and he sent that. He notified GB News in the UK and Nigel Farage that he offered them the clip, which they didn't come back to him. That the lorry in question that's moving the dinghies across the channel from Dover is operated by a company called GXO. That's a company owned by BlackRock, one of the biggest logistics companies in Europe, and it was under contract to the Home Office, the government in the UK at the time.
What do you think the agenda is behind allowing these massive numbers of? Is it just people that hate British society that want to see it destroyed?
Yeah, it's collapsing our culture and our society. It's making us destabilized. It's a distraction, but also we've had a lot more deaths in the UK since the vaccine rollout than we've had births. So we've had collapsing birth rates. I mean, you'd be noticing houses would be empty on the streets, and also a lot of the big money, the globalist money, is invested in our property market. They can't have the property market dropping. So if you keep bringing in millions of illegal migrants, that keeps the demand for property and rents going up. So it protects their investment
and hides the death rate from the jabs.
And also, we do get a small bit of GDP increase by the total population going up by millions. But of course, the real wealth of the nation is the GDP per capita, and that's dropping all the time because these are basically unskilled workers or non-workers who are coming into our country.
Exactly the same here. We've had, I think it's 9 of the last 11 quarters, very close to that, of GDP per capita falling. So the average Australian has been getting poorer, and they pump up the total GDP of the economy by importing 500,000 people a year and go, oh, look at all the jobs we've created, they say, right? And all these jobs have been in the government sector anyway. That's the way they're sort of growing the economy. And what it's done to the house prices here, I think the greatest crime in all of this is what it's done to the house prices and how to simply, young Australians today simply cannot afford to buy a house in any of the capital cities, unless you've got some inheritance, and they're going to come after that later. You need an income of about 200,000+ Australian dollars a year. What's that, like 100 and what's that in the US? About 120,000 US, 130,000 US to be able to even get the most basic house. Here in Sydney, the average house price now is over $1.7 million, and there are basically the most rundown houses that you could see in Sydney, in the lowest. But
you're not short of land, are you?
And you're
not short.
This is the crazy
plenty of land. Why don't you build some houses? You've got plenty of land.
Yeah, I know. Let's find an image of the UK. I've got a great image of the UK, like put inside the map of Australia, to show how actually big we are. And to think that we've had this explosion in housing prices. So, and this has had a major effect, I think, on our society. We've had a whole generation of young kids growing up that know they will never own part of Australia.
Well, what did that lovely Mr. Noah Harari, the one that was Klaus Schwab's advisor, he said, their mantra is you'll own nothing and you'll be happy. Well, that starts with renting. We've also got the big corporates. They are buying houses.
Yes,
they're buying houses in the housing market and whole areas, all for rental. And I had dinner with a local contact of mine who's in the building trade, been in the building trade all his life, and he said the only houses now being constructed in the UK are social houses, and they're all going to the migrants.
Wow! And the meantime, the prices go up, and I think it destroys A society where someone, in their coming out of school realises that they can't own a part of the country, you fundamentally change the psychology of the society, as where people are no longer have the loyalty to their country. Why do you have the loyalty to your country and love of your country if you're denied the ability to own part of it? And that's I'm sure what this is all about. It's about really affecting the mentality of people growing up, converting them to that attitude. Yes, you will own nothing and you'll be happy. A beautiful socialist mentality, and it's so sad to watch, and it's all backed up by the media. Well, you can't even have a discussion here. We talk about this explosion of house prices.
Will anybody talk about Agenda 2030 in the Australian Parliament? No. Because they won't talk about it in the UK Parliament, but all the parties are signed up to it, but nobody wants to ever talk about Agenda 2030.
Look, we've got a few good people there in Parliament, but they are in a distinct minority. And to think we had that general election, and I think by however you could measure it, the Labor Party's performance in the first 3 years, the Albanese government in their first 3 years, was one of the worst performing Australian governments ever. No matter what parameter that you put in, they got elected promising to lower electricity prices, to give everyone, cheaper $275 lower grid. They broke every promise. They failed on the economy, and yet they've been returned with a record majority. And we've got the similarity I see here. Our Liberal Party, which is your Conservative Party, they are gutless and they won't fight. It's almost like it's a one-party.
We've had a succession of prime ministers who betrayed the country, quite honestly. Yeah. I helped to get rid of 3 or 4 Conservative leaders because they were all... But I was naively thinking we'd actually get a good one. Or it'd be my turn eventually when I got rid of all of them. We never did get a good one. But Starmer got in. He's got over 60% of all the seats.
Yeah.
With about 30% of the vote on a 60% turnout. But he's lost half of that support, but he's still been able to ram anything he wants through that Parliament. And any of his MPs who oppose any of his policies, he just suspends them because he's got a massive majority. He could lose 100 MPs and still get everything through.
But the problem is your next general election is not to 2029. Is that correct?
Yep. And I spoke to a Labour MP I'd known for 15 years, and on a human level, I got on okay with him. Obviously, not politically. And I asked him, "Did you vote for the decriminalisation of abortion to birth?" So a policy that wouldn't be supported by 2% of the people in the UK in the population. It flew through the Parliament, of course. And he said, "I don't know, Andrew." He said, "This is a 5-term MP." He said, "It's so bad. I know we'll all be out at the next election." He's a 5-term Labour MP. He said, "I don't even look at the order paper. I just vote the way the party tell me. Yeah. I prefer now not to know what I'm voting for."
Oh, Andrew, that's disgusting. And that full-term abortion, he needs to think about this, whoever he is.
He doesn't want to think about it, does he? He doesn't want to think about it.
That's a 9-month-old human being, fully sentient, dying slowly on a table, potentially. That is what full-term abortion allows. That is disgraceful that he has sanctioned that and looked the other way.
And Andrew, my concern is, in another 4 years, the UK may no longer be the UK. If you have,
we're falling now, to be honest, Craig. But I think I'm afraid we're going to have civil disorder. I don't know what's going to trigger it, and I'm not unconvinced that the current establishment don't want it, so they can have another crackdown on us. But,
and I would say that's part of the Marxist. That's part of the Marxist agenda, isn't it, Andrew? They love division. That's part of bringing in all the migrants, more division. That's part of doing all of the, welcome to country in your country, Craig, and all of the Maori, bureaucratic Maori speak here. We've got a whole third language in New Zealand. It's not even real Maori. It's been brought in by bureaucrats to make us all feel it's us and them. Marxists depend on us and them, don't they? They love warfare.
They are dividing us. The globalists are dividing us, and while we're arguing amongst ourselves they're getting on with their agenda, and it's not for us. They want black against white, they want Christian against Muslim, they want men against women, they want young against old, they want any disruption they can possibly get. Well, actually, we need to unify. We have a common enemy. You're either an authoritarian globalist or you're a libertarian, and I didn't realise what as a libertarian I was until I saw how bad the alternative was, and I know what I want to be.
That's what I'm here with the Libertarian Party now here in Australia. We're only a very small party, but we're fighting to get that libertarian message out, because you're right. Either you are a libertarian or you're authoritarian globalist. That is the divide in the politics today. Hey, look, one other question I ask you. Electricity.
And this left-right business, that's all rubbish as well.
You're right.
It's an illusion of choice. It's not about left and right. It's about right and wrong. It's about good and evil, actually. That's where, and we're very much in a spiritual war as well at the moment.
For the first time in my life during COVID, for the first time in my life, I think I was up against pure, unadulterated evil.
Yes.
People that knew that they were doing the wrong thing, that knew they were lying, that knew that their lies would cause people to die, and they didn't care. And that to me,
but when you look them in the eye, Craig, they're soulless, aren't they?
Yeah, it was appalling. Yeah,
they're soulless people.
A question I said, electricity prices in the UK. I've seen
highest in the world, 5 times higher than China, 4.5 times higher than India. And we're de-industrializing. What businesses we've got left? I think Land Rover, Jaguar are going to move to India, and we'll lose all that industry. I think Rolls-Royce Aerospace is going to be planning to move, and they'll say we just can't afford to manufacture in the UK.
Surely there must be the public must be getting to the message. Hang on, this net zero nonsense, or whatever you think. Even if you think net zero is a great thing, right?
Well, the politicians all do, and that's across all the parties. There's no one willing to speak out. I mean, the last time we had a debate when I was in Parliament last year in the UK, I think there were 15 speakers in the debate on net zero. I was the only one that said it's a load of bunkum and the science doesn't add up, and you're going to make us poorer, colder, and less free.
You had a debate on net zero in the Parliament. You actually had to do that.
We did. We had a debate. Yeah, but they all agree. There's only me on the other side saying, "Hang on, none of this adds up." And carbon dioxide is the gas of life.
Yeah. Well, we had just quick brief history of Australia. In 2010, it was the Labor government that went to election saying, "Well, no carbon tax." They won the election with the carbon tax. Tony Abbott opposed it in 2013, and we won in an absolute landslide. Right? People rejected it. Then the coalition were against them. They came in and we signed up to the Paris target after winning the election in a landslide against it. And then 2019, Scott Morrison went to the election opposing net zero. And then during that, I think about just before COVID, they came in and they changed it and said, no, now we're for net zero. So we've had the Australian public, every time they've had a chance to have a vote, they've said no to net zero. But the last elections, they haven't had a chance, the last 2 elections, because you had both the major parties saying, yeah, we're all for net zero, as our electricity prices go through the roof. And you're right, we're surrendering, it's saying here, our competitive advantage in low-cost electricity is being surrendered. We used to enjoy here, with our massive coal reserves, the lowest electricity prices in the world. And that enables us to pay high wages, to have industry.
Exactly.
And we've...
well, the UK, we're sitting on 200 years of coal reserves in a puddle of oil and gas. And now they've taken all the licenses off the North Sea, but they don't mind us buying oil and gas from the same fields off the Norwegians out of the North Sea, but we can't take our own. I mean, it is and of course, under net zero rules, if I buy my coal from Australia and burn it in the UK,
yes,
it counts on your carbon footprint, not mine, even though I've burnt it. And they're doing the same with the oil and gas from Norway. So by not taking our own oil and gas reserves and paying the Norwegians for it, it's on their... So our government can say, oh, we've reached net zero by buying all our carbons from everybody else. We've just exported our carbon footprint. If that was a thing, and it's not really anyway, but if it was a thing, it's still still
Not to mention, you can still burn all those forests down as well.
Isn't it? If you notice, Craig, that they always talk about everything's environmental until it comes to wars where you can blow things up, and no one ever talks about the carbon footprint of like blowing great big concrete buildings down and the cost of rebuilding and the environmental cost. Never ever comes into the equation, does it?
What about the solar
It's
power?
you when you go to the supermarket on a Sunday in your 4-wheel drive. You're the problem.
Yeah. And again, it is very hard to get a proper debate on this in the mainstream media. The propaganda the propaganda.
It's become the new religion, hasn't it, for some of the young people? It's like a new religion for them, this global warming cult.
But when you look at the blades of the windmills, they will in 20 years be such an environmental disaster. They do not break down and no one knows what to do with them.
They don't do the birds a lot of good either.
No, they don't. Craig, can you talk about Blackout Bowen? You did a very good post. Craig does wonderful outspoken posts like you, Andrew, and he's calling for the resignation of somebody who straight out lied, didn't he?
Well, our version of your Ed Miliband is this guy here in Australia called Chris Bowen. Chris Blackout Bowen, and these two could have been separated at birth. The same demented ideology, and what's dangerous about them, I says, their arrogance is greater than their ignorance, and the amount of lies that comes out of this man's mouth. He deceived Parliament, misled Parliament the other day. He's put out a video only a few days ago saying that India is now gets most of their electricity from renewable energy. Now. You laugh, right? This is what the bloke said, and he is there, a minister of the crown. One of these TikTok videos with a bit of fancy background music sort of thing, and he's wandering around the city. It was interesting. He must have filmed it, you said, very early in the morning because there's no one around him. Because if people saw him on the streets, I'm sure they'd give him a bit of a gobful about what he's done to electricity prices.
What I have found out is that now a lot of MPs in the UK, the government are providing them with bodyguards.
Is that right? Yeah.
Yeah, even backbenchers.
Yeah. Look,
they know what they've done, and they know what the people are going to think of them.
Look, just on a serious note,
crazy.
I fear that if I was, running security agencies, my real fear would be down the track is that when people work out what some of these politicians have done during COVID. And if you find that your wife or your child or yourself suffered from a catastrophic vaccine injury, and when they work out that happened because politicians lied and forced them to inject it, I really think there's going to be some security issues, for these people going forward. I don't say that lightly.
I'm hoping that they're all in prison anyway, so we can keep them nice and secure. That's to be safer for them, better for us. Yeah.
Yeah, that's probably the best thing where they belong.
Because also, when this all comes out, Craig, I mean, we're going to have a worldwide breakdown of trust in our institutions, in our politics, in our medicine, in our science, in our courts. And only those who've perpetrated these crimes against our public, the humanity, only holding them to account is ever going to get the trust back in the public. Why would they ever trust anybody who seeks power again? But also people who seek to hold positions of power, they need to know that if you ever think about selling the people out like we've been sold out this time, you're going to face the worst penalties possible.
Exactly.
It's got to work both ways.
And that's why we need proper, solid inquiries or royal commissions, in fact, into this COVID area. And I think not just one, you need multiple royal commissions. Like that AstraZeneca, where where the data was very clear that AstraZeneca was not safe. It was causing all these clots and different deaths and illnesses. And the way they covered that up and tried to keep it perpetuating, that was back in April 2021 that they did that.
Of course, the head of AstraZeneca received a knighthood from the king.
Yeah.
But those inquiries, when I was in mainstream media, we had so many inquiry reports that would come out 2, 3, 5 years after the scandal had broken, and you just knew what would happen. You would interview the minister, he'd go, yes, we'll look at these suggestions.
The public inquiries in the UK were brought in by Blair, I think in 2003, 2004. That's because he knew he was in trouble over the Iraq war, and they're specifically precluded from apportioning criminal or civil guilt and any punishment. And it's not a coincidence, Craig, that when Tony Blair and his Labour Party got in 1997, the first piece of legislation, which was never in his manifesto, that they put through, the most important thing for them to put through, they thought, they took the death penalty out of the Treason Act. And I put it to the listeners that every politician in the UK, every senior politician has committed treason against the public since 97. And they're very grateful for Tony Blair for taking that death penalty out of the
Well, to me, what is being done in the name of net zero, that is basically a wealth transfer from Australia and the UK to communist China, is a treason. I think undoubtedly, I think it is the communist
collusion for the benefit of a foreign power against the your own people. In fact, it's because they're paid from the public purse, it's high treason. That's the definition of, if you're paid from the public person, you commit treason, it's high treason.
And for people who don't understand, Craig, that means all the solar panels that are bought, all that money, those billions are going back into Chinese coffers.
Look at every
all the windmills.
And all those green products are created using coal-fired power stations because it's cheaper.
That's right.
Yes.
Every single thing to do with the net zero agenda basically results in a wealth transfer out of Australia and the UK to the communist Chinese. The solar panels are all subsidised. The wind turbines are all subsidised. That pushes up our cost of energy, which means we lose industry off to China and wealth off.
And even the companies who own the green technologies getting all the subsidies paid for by the ordinary people in Australia and UK, they're all offshore companies anyway. They're not even paying tax in Australia or the UK.
You just have to shake your head at where we're at, and it's just important while we keep on fighting.
I mean, back to these reports, I don't believe we should have these inquiries anymore. I think I agree with you. They're just so token, and that goes right back to Blair.
What we need is criminal charges. We can still bring private criminal prosecutions. We need those, and we need to prosecute people and say, where's your defence? This is what we believe you've done. Where's your defence? Get them into court.
And they know they're guilty. I mean, last summer, a friend of mine was in a cafe on the Coromandel and Jacinda Ardern came in. But before she came in, something like 7 security people came in and checked out the whole cafe. The whole cafe went silent. It was a complete dampener. Now, she lives, she bought a very expensive beach house in a place called Tairua. When she is in town, the streets are lined with security cars. We, the people, are paying for this criminal to be protected well after she's left office and left the country primarily. But she has all the security back in New Zealand. She might as well wear a sign saying, I am guilty, I did hurt you, and I'm scared of you. That's what she might as well do.
Exactly the same in the UK.
But she has a single source of truth. I remember I watched that and I thought...
No, Craig, it was, everyone misheard it. It's the single source of tooth. She's got the large teeth.
But how many politicians, even if you believed that and you thought that you were, how you could actually say it in public in front of television cameras? It was just extraordinary. So, but one thing, and one of the greatest criminal acts, I think, during COVID was that Oxford University. Now, I don't know if you've seen this, that study that they did into hydroxychloroquine. I don't know if you've seen this at all. Now,
well, I got the in probably February, March 2020, I got the papers sent to me of the efficacy of hydroxychloroquine for treating coronaviruses. And I sent it to the government and said, look, this looks really interesting. We need to look at this. I also sent it to Jeremy Hunt, who had been for 7 years the health secretary, and he was then chair of the Health Select Committee. And I gave it a week, and then I rang Jeremy Hunt on his mobile and say, this guy'd been health secretary for 7 years and now he was chair of the Health Select Committee. And I said, Jeremy, have you had a chance to look at that paper I sent you on hydroxychloroquine? Looks like some good efficacy. It could be really useful against a coronavirus. And he said to me on the phone, Andrew, please don't send me scientific papers. I don't understand them.
Wow.
And I said, well, you were a health secretary for 7 years and you don't understand scientific papers. What, and you have no access to someone who can explain them to you?
But Andrew, those papers were not, you didn't have to have any great medical credentials to read those. You just had to have a little bit of common sense and understand maybe like, what primary school maths. and you could have worked out those things. But what got me on that study from Oxford is that they had, I think, they had 1,000 odd people recruited into the study. I think there was like 400.
Yeah, but they overdosed them.
Overdosed them.
And so they killed people.
Yeah. Remember, they killed. It was 1 in 4 people that volunteered for that trial died. Right. Yeah. Imagine running a trial and say you're out recruiting people to volunteer, and the end result is 1 in 4 of you died. Right.
Well, what about in Australia? Did you? I mean, I've been looking into the midazolam and morphine murder of the vulnerable elderly in hospital to create the first wave. It was called NICE Guideline 163, brought in by Matt Hancock. I'm attending a coroner's inquest in London next week on a couple of days, and that's into the Derek Dimmock death. A man who went into hospital. He got dementia, but he went in for respite care with gout. And they killed him over the weekend under the COVID protocols with a respiratory suppressant of midazolam and morphine. I mean, the same will have happened in Australia. This was remdesivir in America. It was a lot of ours in Ireland.
Yeah, and also induced comas and putting people on ventilators. I had family members. I remember one poor woman, she was a wife, the husband, very distressed, rang me. She said her husband was had COVID and, he was okay, and they convinced him to go to hospital. And he went to hospital and he said he was, had a little bit of a runny nose. They said 6 hours later he rang me and said, they're going to put me on an incubator. And they put him on an incubator, gave him remdesivir, and he died.
You mean on a ventilator?
85% of people who went on the ventilators died. And Craig, what I said in the Parliament is absolutely correct. In the UK, the average time from being diagnosed with COVID-19 to death from COVID-19 was 18.3 days. A viral infection burns out after 7 days. None of those people died of COVID-19. They had secondary bacterial pneumonia infections, and because they weren't given the normal treatment, which would have been antibiotics, that's what they died of, bacterial pneumonia.
Well, remember, at the time at that Oxford study where they killed 1 in 4 people, and I think it was 400 or 600 deaths or something like that.
It's a lot.
Like Dr. Zelenko in the US and Dr. Brian Tyson and many others that I've spoken with, that were treating with hydroxychloroquine, zinc, and an antibiotic, were having 0 deaths.
Yes.
0. They were saying,
I don't know if you know Dr. Pierre Corey, who wrote the book The Truth About Ivermectin.
Yeah, he's been out to Australia well here, and
he's a good man.
He's a terrific guy.
I was just watching a guy called Professor Tom Barodi called me one night here in Australia. This is one of the nights I was down in Canberra, sort of by myself, with having a party by myself, with waiting for my pizza to cook. I got a telephone call. It was a Professor Barodi, and I'd heard of him and I knew of his expertise. He was considered a medical genius and had saved countless lives and billions of dollars with all the medical inventions he come up with throughout his career. He rang me and he said, "Hey, Craig," he said, "you're 100% right on this hydroxychloroquine." I said, "Professor," I said, "please, can you come out? Can you make some statements? Can you give me some air cover? I'm getting slaughtered and cut to pieces down here." And he said to me, he used the words, "It's dirty." And I thought, that's an unusual. What do you mean it's dirty? And he said, "It's been contaminated by the media." And he said, "I reckon I can get exactly the same results or even better using ivermectin, replacing hydroxychloroquine with ivermectin. And instead of using azithromycin, I'll use doxycycline as the antibiotic." So his protocol was ivermectin, zinc, and doxycycline. And he said, "I reckon that's going to work just as well or better than the hydroxychloroquine." So he went out and started to talk about that. And it was absolutely smashed. You couldn't talk about it. You were censored. You were done. And now all the studies show it's absolutely crystal clear that it was a highly effective treatment. Now, I got a script for it before it was made illegal here in Australia. And I don't know, it was COVID.
But when you've got a Ministry of Truth, you'll never have that exposed again, will you?
Yeah.
Absolutely. RFKJ's just been talking about how good ivermectin is, and a friend of mine, Dr. Bruce Dooley, who exposed the Federation of State Medical Boards, which rules all the doctors, he has been cut off as a doctor in New Zealand simply for giving some ivermectin during the mad years of the pandemic.
I went over to Ireland a few weeks ago to support an excellent doctor, Dr. Marcus de Bruin.
Yes.
He's great.
who objected to the vaccines and also the midazolam and morphine treatment of vulnerable elderly. And he actually showed me. We gave speeches outside the Irish Medical Council's building. They didn't come out, to quite a crowd, and he's been threatened with having his license taken away in Ireland. Then they sent him a letter, which he showed me, where the Irish Medical Board Council have said basically sign a gagging order where you won't criticise any health policy in Ireland ever again. And we'll just get to back and we'll just reinstate you and everyone else carry on as we are.
Wow.
I mean, he's not going to do that. He can't do that. All doctors around the world have got a duty. If they see anything that's unsafe for their patients or the community, they've got a duty to speak out about it. Well, you can't sign that away. Can't sign that away.
There's a group in Texas. It's in the commercial streets of Texas. It's called the Federation of State Medical Boards, and it rules all the medical councils and medical boards around the world. It was set up in 1912, and it was set up by the Rockefellers. And at the beginning of COVID, no doctors knew about it until this American doctor in New Zealand, Dr. Bruce Dooley, exposed it. But they are bullies. They're absolute bullies.
The globalists use our regulators of every profession.
Yeah.
I mean, from the moment I spoke out about the vaccines, Craig, I had back-to-back parliamentary standards investigations into me.
Yes.
My barrister's got 4 bar standards board investigations into him. I mean, I didn't have any trouble for 12 years, and then as soon as I started speaking about the vaccines, I seem to have constant trouble. You know, the SRA, the Solicitors Regulatory Authority, and all of these regulators have taken money from the WEF's Regulators Pioneer Fund, and that's how they discipline people who break the narrative.
Right, exactly the same thing happened to me.
I was exactly the same.
I had we have this thing about
when you go against the narrative, Craig, you start becoming very unlucky, don't you?
Yeah. So with our parliamentary expenditure, if you travel somewhere, you're just allowed to basically charge it. The government. There's a government travel agent that books it for you, sort of thing. Right now, you're able to travel business class, but I felt if I was paying for it myself, if I'm traveling Sydney to Melbourne, Sydney to Brisbane or Adelaide, and that sort of structure, I only need to travel economy. You know, to me, the business class was an unjustifiable expense, which I wouldn't pay myself, and therefore I thought that it's unfair that I charge it to my constituents. So I always travelled, economy in that sort of leg. Anyhow, when I spoke out against it, I got an investigation into all my expenditure. Right? But what happened? Then they leaked that I was being investigated to one of the newspapers. They then did a freedom of information request to see who was being investigated, and they ran this big headline against me: Craig Kelly being investigated for misappropriation of government.
Yeah.
And the misappropriation I'd made was when I flew to Melbourne. I went down in the morning, came back in the afternoon, so I didn't even have any overnight expenses, right? So like a 6 o'clock flight out of Sydney in the morning to go and speak at a protest rally, which was the biggest protest rally in the history of Australia, right, against the COVID vaccine mandates, at a time when I had legislation before the Parliament on that issue. So it was absolutely unquestionable that I could do it. It was like, I think, a $250 return fare down to Melbourne, and they were running all these headlines and stories against me at the same time when other MPs were rorting the thing for tens of thousands of dollars. It was
I had a situation where I was being invited to speak in parliaments all over Europe, mostly about the WHO and the vaccines.
Yes,
and they didn't like it. And we have a rule in the UK Parliament: if you're going to another parliament in Europe and speaking with even one elected representative, you can claim that on expenses. Yeah. Parliament will pay for that, and you don't even have to declare it.
Yeah.
They wouldn't, even though I was going to all these parliaments and meeting parliamentarians and speaking in those parliaments, including the European Parliament of all places, right? With 5 MEPs, Christine Anderson and others. So then I had to rely on a European MEP saying, well, I'll invite you over and the EU will pay for it, which they didn't like that either, did they? Yeah. But then we have a rule then because it wasn't paid for by my parliament because they broke the rules and wouldn't pay for it. Then they have a rule that you have to register who's paid for that trip within 28 days and exactly down to the penny how much it cost. Well, of course, the EU wouldn't play that game. When it doesn't matter how many times I wrote to them, said, "Can you tell me what the travel costs were that I've got to?" They wouldn't tell me. So then they did me for not registering in 28 days. But there was no way I could, because the EU, doesn't matter how many emails I sent to the EU, said, "You've got to give me this information within 28 days." They didn't give it to me, did they?
It's amazing how the establishment, and they certainly came after us. The other one I could tell you was after the election campaign, I was taken to court by the Australian Electoral Commission over the font size on my, they get those posters or the election signs where it's got your face on them, it's got, vote Craig Kelly sort of thing, right? They took me to court over the font size of the authorisation down the bottom. Now, in the legislation, there's no it has to be 8-point font or 9-point font, right? The legislation says it must be visible from a distance it's meant to be seen, right? Now, they took me to court over that. It was the most ridiculous case I've ever heard in my life, right? We know they spent $500,000 trying to prosecute me at the federal court.
It's worth every penny, Craig.
They were trying to bankrupt me, and I'm sure they were trying to make my life miserable. But what they didn't understand, I actually enjoyed every minute of it.
Well, so 2 weeks after the general election, where they fiddled the votes in Northwest Australia, I'm investigating that, and I'd already exposed in the UK Parliament the child trafficking for paedophilia from Ukraine to the UK, which is horrendous, and I can't get anybody to investigate it from the UK authorities. 2 weeks after the general election, I'm looking at how they've fiddled the election here. Leicestershire police come and pick me up and accuse me of paedophilia.
Wow.
And say that it all happened at Freemasonic lodge meetings. It would take them about 2 minutes to calculate. I'd never been a member of the Freemasons in my life, and I'd never been to a lodge meeting. And they hung that over me for a couple of months until they came back and said, "No, there's no evidence."
Wow.
But and it cost me thousands with a lawyer to accompany me to go and give all the statements. You're giving all those statements on the recordings. It's just ludicrous.
I'm going to ask
evidential problems. Yeah, there's evidential problems. There's no evidence whatsoever.
Honestly, I'm just going to ask everybody watching this, please share this everywhere. Please do your own cuts from it. Please get out to all the so-called normies, as we used to call them in COVID times, the people who are not awake yet. Let them know the extent of the corruptions of our governments. We must stand up. Let's move to that. What are the solutions? Craig, we'll begin with you. I know on September the 13th, you're going to be part of or organising a rally against the censorship, because who knows, in 6 months, we might not even be able to have a discussion like this online. Craig, what are your solutions?
We've got to fight back. Now, I believe that we can, if the Albanese government realises that this is going to cost them enough votes, right? We're lucky we have elections every 3 years. We don't have to wait until 2029. Our next election is 2027, which is still a while off. But if the Albanese government thinks that this could cost them votes and they could lose seats and potentially lose the next election, that is what they'll change their opinion. Now, I'm convinced that when there's still a lot of fighting spirit left in the Aussies, and I'm convinced when people actually work out that the plan is that their social media accounts are going to be shut down unless they submit to digital ID and some form of facial scanning technology to log on, I think people are going to rise and they're going to protest against it. So we've got our first protest, and hopefully there'll be more to come. The first protest is set down for September the 13th, Saturday here in Sydney. We're having a protest outside the E-Safety Commissioner's office in Sydney, which is down in Pyrmont Bay Park, down there in the Darling Harbour area. And we're going to send a message loud and clear that we're not going to sit back and take this. As I said, we fought against this in 1987 with the Australia card. Our forefathers fought against the miner's licence, against the stockade. We are not going to sit back and just take this digital ID under the pretense of, we're protecting the children. We're not going to sit down. There's a lot of us determined that this is the hill we're going to fight and we're going to die on. Because if we lose this battle, if we lose the battle for free speech, all the other battles that we fight, we can't win. This is the one we must win.
We absolutely must. And we have the Anzacs here, Andrew. That's the Australian and New Zealand soldiers, the forces that fought in World War I and World War II like brothers. We are totally betraying them. as two nations,
Absolutely.
Craig, if we allow ourselves to be silenced. My father was in World War II, and he said to me all through those years of my growing up, he was a much older father, he married late, and he used to say to me, I gave everything so you could be free. I will not betray that legacy. So, Andrew, what about you? What are the solutions, do you think?
Well, it's amazing, the similarities, because we've organised a massive protest for Saturday, the 13th of September. We'll be outside Parliament.
Sorry. You can't make this up. The parallels between the two places.
We're going to have at least 150,000 people on the streets in London. I think we'll get 200,000. I'll be speaking there, and we've got Jordan Peterson coming over. We've got lots of people. This free speech issue, and hopefully we'll get some coverage in Canada as well, where they're going through the same trials and tribulations.
Should be promoting this as a global day of protest.
Yes.
Here in the UK, Saturday the 13th of September, where if you're a patriotic Australian, if you're a patriotic Englishman, get out on that day and protest.
And get those Europeans out there as well. They're under the same threat, the jackboot of the European Union.
The best thing is, currently, they think they were installing fear. They think they were scaring everyone. On the 13th of September, they're going to witness the biggest fuck you to the establishment this country's ever seen. They're going to see people come in numbers that we could never have dreamed of. Yeah? We're going to lock down the whole of our capital city with people who are going to be there to celebrate their identity and their culture. They have wanted to break us and make sure we're not united. We're going to unite like they've never seen on the 13th of September, and we're going to do it our way. And when I say our way, we're not going to riot. There's not going to be no face coverings. There's going to be no balaclavas. There's going to be smiles, children, celebration, and a togetherness that will strike the biggest fear into that British establishment. And they will realise that, and I want the world to see, because the world is going to be watching September 13th in central London, and they're going to realise that Britain is awake. And they weren't awake. 5 years ago, this would be unthinkable. Yeah, we're going to show you how awake they are.
Look, it's been the UK, Australia, New Zealand that have led the fort for freedom over the last century, and we're going to have to lead it again this century as well.
I wonder, Craig, if you can beam in Andrew's speech, if you get a screen up, or vice versa.
Maybe we could do something, get some pre-recorded or something, because our time differences will be a bit different, sort of thing. So
yeah.
Well, we can liaise on that, and I'll speak to the organisers, and I'm sure we can do something. We'll probably be a bit before you, won't we?
Yes, you will, Andrew. I see that. I see that there have been huge marches already. Have you seen the latest with Tommy Robinson? We'll just put the footage up here.
What a feeling. Okay? Most hated man in Britain. All your lives didn't work. And the best thing is, we're unifying the people. Exactly what you wanted to stop. You wanted to divide them. You wanted to separate us. So we look divided. Come on.
Back up, mate. Back up.
Okay. Come on.
And he'll be obviously there on the 13th organising that. And we've got a great lineup of international speakers. We've got some MEPs coming over as well. It's as the globalists would say, it's a global. This freedom business is a global problem, and we need a global solution, and not the global solution they're thinking of. I can assure you. And it doesn't matter where we break it, whether we break it in New Zealand, we break it in Australia, we break it in the UK, we break it somewhere else.
Hey, finally, just to finish off on the rugby, you're a bit lucky. We're a bit stiff here with the British Lions. We almost got you. We almost had you, sort of thing. Just a bit too good for us
this time.
This time.
This is something else you have in common too, rugby men as well.
Yeah, What was your rugby background, Andrew? You loved to follow your rugby over there in the UK?
I played at Nottingham University a lot. And my rugby claim to fame is that Brian Moore's 2 years older than me. He looks a lot older. He's had a hard life. And he injured himself and he had to referee for half a season at Nottingham University. And he refereed a game where I was hooking in, and Brian Moore threatened to send me off for rough play. That's rough, isn't it, Craig? That's rough.
Well, Andrew, I played loose head prop sort of thing, so I could take you. If I was trying to pick what position you would have played, I reckon I would have had marked you as a hooker for sure. Sort of thing.
Yes, I was hooking.
And Brian Moore was fairly rough.
Yeah.
It's been a delight to talk. I do want your final words to people who are reeling, seeing the lockstep of the corruptions in so many areas, who are realizing our systems have completely broken down, that our politicians are completely sold out, who are wondering, how can I protect my family? So I want to begin with you, Craig. Advice for people so they don't go away and give up and despair. There is still hope. There's life, there's hope.
I'd say, look, every generation has had fights and challenges before it. Our generation is no different. We are certainly in a dark period at the moment where the forces of authoritarian globalism are on the march and have the upper hand. But we've been here, our forefathers have been here before, and they fought against us and they've won. We can do exactly the same thing. There are thousands, there are hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people around the world that are prepared to stand up, and this is the hill we're going to fight and die on. All the facts, all the data, all the science, all the evidence, and all the history is on our side. We just got to get out there and show some courage to fight it. Andrew's shown tremendous courage over there in the UK. We only need people to show just a scintilla of that. Get out there. We've got the 13th. Let's start it on that 13th of September. Let's get as many people out on the streets back in the UK and Australia to protest about what's going on, and let's take our countries back.
That is wonderful, and you've shown tremendous courage. And that Harari piece we had earlier, I would just say, we are not guinea pigs. Each one of us matters. We matter as much as these few parasites in the parasite class. They think they are more important. They think they deserve the world. We deserve the world. We are the many, and they are the few. Andrew, your final words.
Well, yeah, the self-proclaimed so-called global elite, they would have you think that you are not powerful. And there's nothing we can do to stand against them. That is not correct. I agree with everything that Craig has said. We stand on the truth, and the truth doesn't need protecting. It only needs a little bit of courage. It's lies that need to be protected. That's why we're facing the censorship of freedom of speech around the world. We need to turn out on the 13th. We need to stand together. We need to not be divided, and we are going to win. I think we're in a spiritual war, and I've read the last page of the book, and we're going to win. We've got to. It's happened on our watch, this slippage in democracy and freedom, and we've got to put it right for the next generations, else they'll never know the freedoms that they've lost.
Here.
Wonderful to have you both on. There's something really powerful about both of you meeting at last, even
and
online.
Properties hooker, mate. That's what it is. That's right.
Lovely to have you both on, and thank you both, and we'll do this again.
All the best.
Thanks, Liz. Thanks, Andrew. Fantastic to speak with you.